Veteran on the Move, episode number 14. Welcome to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you're a transitioning veteran, an entrepreneur wannabe, or someone who's still stuck in that job trying to escape, this podcast is dedicated to your success. So welcome aboard, sit back, and enjoy the ride. Are you ready for your second half comeback? It's never too late to be what you might have been. Today we're talking with DG Gregory, host of the Second Half Comeback podcast, Lessons in Lifestyle Redesign. All right, DG Gregory, hey, it's great to have you on the show and be talking with you today about Second Half Comeback.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Good to see you.
Hey, I was thrilled to see not too long ago when you went live in iTunes and launched your dream, the Second Half Comeback podcast, because if you recall, it wasn't that long ago at the beginning of the year when you and I were sitting next to each other at New Media Expo, and neither one of us had launched our podcast yet, and now we both have, and here we are talking about it.
Yeah, I know, man. It's been a long journey. It feels like I jokingly say I'm the longest launch in internet history, it feels like, because I struggled for years to get this thing off the ground. But it feels good to finally have it done, and congratulations to you as well.
Hey, thank you. And I know how... excuse me. I know how it goes with spending years thinking about it. And I know part of my problem was I spent years thinking about what it was I was actually going to try to do, coming up with that idea that I could actually get behind and get some momentum going. So it's great to actually I've been listening to some of your podcasts, and it's awesome. I love it. And it's really right along the lines with what Veteran on the Move is doing. Veteran on the Move is more focused with military veterans transitioning into some type of entrepreneurship. And if there's no better term for that, I would definitely call that a second half comeback. Whether you're just getting out of the military after your first 4-year enlistment, or whether you're retiring after 20, 30 years. I mean, essentially what you're doing when you transition is you're setting the stage for your second half comeback. So what you're doing is right up the alley of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I love it. I listened to a couple of your podcasts yesterday, and I love what you got going on there. And I definitely see a ton of similarities. And I think we're probably all. I don't come from a military background per se, other than being a military brat. But I think we face the same challenges, right? Like, we spent a whole big portion of our life, working towards a certain dream, working towards a certain end. And then all of a sudden you get to that point where you retire, or it's time to move on to something else. And you kind of got to figure out what's next, now what, basically.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple different types of veterans out there. There's those that they never even begin to think beyond what they're going to do when they do get out. And then there's the others that while they're in, all they ever do is constantly think about what they're going to do when they get out. But either way, you got to come up with some kind of a plan. What's your transition plan going to be? Is it going to be go back to school? Is it going to be go get a job and then figure it out, or are you going to transition into some type of entrepreneurial, independent type venture?
That's right. And the greatest news, I think, is that there's probably never been a better time in history, really, to recreate yourself, right? Like, this is an amazing era we live in. And you and I were fortunate enough to meet up at the type of event that's just filled with thousands of people that are, using the internet, using technology, along with face-to-face meetings to recreate their life, to redesign their life. So, once upon a time, guys would get out of the military, or in my case, I'm a firefighter, guys would retire from the fire service and they'd have to go into, whatever, construction or real estate, or, you know what I mean? Try to start a career from scratch. And now with this amazing technology and amazing ability we have to, have an online business, or at least establish relationships online, I feel like it's a great time for people to create their own second half comeback.
Oh, yeah. And like you said, there is no better time than to get out there and start your own business, whether you're going to do an online version of that or some type of brick and mortar type store. There's a massive amount of emphasis on entrepreneurship, not only in the U.S., but really worldwide, because governments and cities and everything realize that entrepreneurship is the way to economic recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, not having been a military guy myself, just seeing it in the family, I imagine there's historically some unique challenges for veterans in that, I don't know if as a mindset, if they're, what's the word I'm looking for? If they're sort of naturally entrepreneurial, you know what I mean? Or if they're kind of used to that structure and everything that the military provides. So,
Well, that's a very good point. Actually, you're spot on both of those. Veterans, 45% of veterans statistics show go out and start their own business.
Oh, wow.
And veterans are 30% more likely to be successful at running their own business. So those are really good statistics, if you're a veteran looking to transition out. However, you mentioned structure and basically you got your plan and your either the troops that you're in charge of are counting on you, and you've got your boss watching, and you got the CO's intent and everything else. So you have a lot of structure that you wake up every day. There's really no doubt what it is you're supposed to be doing and where you're supposed to be. And I've noticed one thing, and you may have experienced the same thing. When you get out, I'm real good at doing something. And I always want to be doing something. And it's not like I lay around the house, but I'm constantly asking myself, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now? Maybe I should be doing that instead. There's really, as an entrepreneur, you can get lonely real quick. And when we were out there at the New Media Expo at the beginning of the year, it was almost, it was almost like some kind of a high being around all these other people that were into entrepreneurship and wanting to learn about podcasting and how to get their own businesses up and running. And as an entrepreneur, you can get real lonely. And you mentioned one of the episodes, your latest episode I was just listening to, talks about surrounding yourself with good people. And the Jim Rohn quote, one of my favorites, is about your income is the average of the 5 people's income you hang around with the most. And that's so true. And one thing I've experienced, and I try to reiterate to folks on this podcast, is if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you want to really get there and launch your own idea, you need to get around other entrepreneurs and people that are like-minded and get into mastermind groups or whatever it is you need to do, go to conferences and that kind of thing, and get around it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said in that episode, I've definitely figured out here in the last probably year. It probably was New Media Expo that changed everything. And then I also just came back from World Domination Summit. And that's those two events and the connections I made there and the relationships I made there definitely changed everything for me. And as I say in the episode, in a couple different ways, I always knew that you need to surround yourself with successful people, and it's kind of a mindset thing. And to have the support of the people around you is huge. But the part I never sort of factored in is that there's a sort of a tangible aspect, like being around sort of regular people that you meet and build relationships with, and seeing that they're doing what you dream about doing changes everything. Because until that, when you're just sort of online, taking courses and trying to learn these things and reading blogs and listening to podcasts, all those people seem like they're a step above you. They seem different, because they've already made it. And it's hard for you to grasp that you can do it too.
Right.
Until you get around a group of 1,000 people that are just like you, and they're all struggling to do the same thing. And then they're having success. These people that we met at New Media Expo, like you, have launched and are having success. And so that's when it starts to click in your head and you go, wait a minute, I can do it. And if all these other people, if my friends that I've met can do it, I can do it too. And that kind of flipped a switch in my head. And then additionally, obviously having their support and now having a network that you can work with. But that's when it finally clicked for me, like having some of these online relationships and then cementing them in person, face to face, with shared experiences at conferences and meetups and things like that has definitely been kind of the secret sauce for me to getting this thing launched.
Yeah. And, I experienced the same thing out at New Media Expo myself, but even several months before that, I discovered through my transition out of the military, for many years, I was in the Marine Corps for a little over 24 years. And all those years, I had all these great ideas, and I'd play around with different business ideas and that kind of thing. And as soon as I'd start to get a little traction or get a little momentum, another deployment would come up, or PCS would happen, and we'd uproot and move somewhere, and I'd just lose all my momentum, and I'd never come back to that idea again, or the opportunity was lost at that point. And when I finally transitioned out of the military, I went through this kind of transformation. And one of the experiences being New Media Expo, but there was a number of others, and that's where I came up with the idea for this podcast. Is hey, you know what? I finally made it out into the world of entrepreneurship, which is what I've been, my dream has been for quite a long time. And I want to capture and feature all the little steps and people and places and programs along the way that I discovered that a lot of veterans may not realize are out there to help you transition into those things. And a lot of these programs that I feature as far as for veterans, they're all available for civilians too. It's just there's little pieces or specialty elements of it as for veterans, or even spouses, and sometimes even family members of veterans, like whether it be entrepreneurial boot camps and that kind of stuff. All those things are available for any civilian looking to get their idea out in the marketplace. Even more so, they're available for veterans often for free, because they get grants and funding and stuff. And you, as a veteran, you can apply to go to these programs and get into them for free. So it's all the same stuff. I just chose to niche down a little bit and focus more towards the veteran experience, because that's what my experience was, and that's where I'm at. That's where I am. So we obviously have had a parallel experience, one from the military and one from the civilian side. But as far as mentality and everything goes, it's very like-minded experience. If cover your background a little bit. Sure. I know you're a fireman, but you and your wife also have experienced this entrepreneurship thing for quite a while. Yeah. It's not like a new thing for you.
No, definitely. So, so my wife and I've been married 20 plus years. I have a little 6-year-old boy, and we live out here more or less Denver, Colorado. But we're both East Coast kids. We're both military brats. I'm from, my dad was career Army. He's a Vietnam vet. And then kind of did the classic double dip, retired from the military after 20 plus years, took a whopping single year off, and then immediately went back as a civilian and worked for Defense Intelligence for another 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in the DC area. My wife's a Navy brat, so she grew up kind of down in the Norfolk area, Virginia Beach area. And we met in college in Virginia. And coming out of college, I was just kind of a journalism major, kind of a liberal arts, had no real plan. I played lacrosse in college and was mostly focused on that, not, career plans. And so when I came out, it was a real tough job market, and I just bounced around doing some, sales jobs and kind of anything I could do to support the family. Excuse me. And it ended up, I had some family that had a real estate appraisal business, which I'd never heard of. Frankly, I was a young guy, hadn't bought a house yet. And I was in a tough spot, couldn't really find a decent job. And they agreed to let me come down and work with them and see if I liked it. And that was down in Huntsville, Alabama. So I uprooted and left my girlfriend behind, moved down to Alabama, and worked under my aunt and uncle for a couple years, and kind of learned the nuts and bolts of the real estate appraisal business. And then eventually moved on.
Now let me guess here real quick. I hate to interrupt you, but that's probably where you met your wife too, because that's where the DIA is, in Huntsville.
No, so I met her in college.
Okay.
and then I dragged her down to Alabama with me eventually, and we spent a couple of years down there. It was great. And eventually, it was time to sort of move on from the family business and start my own business. So, fortunately, she was an accountant coming out of college. I say fortunately for me because she hated it, but it gave her the ability to kind of get a job anywhere. Accountants were always in demand.
Right.
So we literally just kind of made the bold decision, hey, if we're going to plant some roots somewhere, let's pick someplace we love. And we decided to move out west to Colorado and kind of start from scratch. And we did that back in 1996 and spent a couple years struggling to, grind out the start of a brand new business. But again, luckily she had accounting ability, so she had a good accounting job, and spent a few years grinding to get the appraisal business, and slowly built it up. And it's now been going for 20 years. It's quite successful, 6-figure business, supported the family for years. The downside, as I've mentioned in my podcast, and you and I have talked about, is that it's your standard old school service business. It's a trade your time directly for money. You're stuck chained to that business day in and day out. So we're fortunate on the one hand to make good money and to have that business. I never want to sound ungrateful for that. However, now that I have a 6-year-old, I just want to spend more time doing the things I love with the people I love. And instead, we're kind of chained to that appraisal business. So
yeah, it's kind of like, I think you almost have to be up into your 40s before you come to this realization, or at least that's the case with me, where you start thinking, I need to get into something where I can build momentum, kind of that proverbial snowball rolling down the mountain, so that it starts to gain momentum and build, and then it just grows and goes on its own and keeps going while you're sleeping. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like what you've experienced with the real estate appraisal business. Is you're almost trading time for dollars. Even though it's your own business, you're not really working by the hour, but if you're not working, you're not making money.
Well, and like most service businesses, you're chained to somebody else's schedule is part of the big problem, because the reason people get appraisals are usually tied directly to a home loan of some kind, either a purchase transaction or refinance. So there's always, these artificial deadlines that are set that you have to meet. So, and then obviously when you're appraising somebody's house, you have to schedule with them to come physically look at their house. So you're always having to do things on everybody else's schedule. And that makes it difficult to plan your own life, and much less, God forbid, step away and try to take a vacation or something like that. So that's, you know what I mean? That's definitely been a challenge. And then along the way, I kind of fell in love with the firefighting thing. I started doing some volunteer firefighting because we had moved up to Breckenridge, to a mountain community, and I just thought it'd be a good way to meet people in the area when I first moved there. And I fell in love with it after a couple of years, just doing the volunteer thing. And I asked my wife, do you think I could actually get hired to do this? Because obviously firefighters work a schedule that you can still have another business and still do other things. And so I took a kind of a crazy shot at it. I was 36 years old at the time, and I managed to get hired professionally down here in the Denver area. And I've been doing that for 10 years now, and that's great too.
Yeah, that's almost a second half comeback there, starting out firefighting at 36.
I know, right? I know. But it was nice because it added some stability to our situation as well. As you know, when you have a solo business like the real estate appraisal, you're on your own as far as retirement, as far as health insurance, as far as all these things. So the firefighting, in addition to being something I really enjoy and working with great people and having a great schedule, it does also give us the retirement and the health benefits and all those things that you sort of struggle with as an entrepreneur.
Right, and that's one of those things that oftentimes it gets missed as far as the entrepreneurial transition. Is I would never advocate just quitting your job and jumping all in like that. Now, some guys might be in a particular scenario where maybe if you're still pretty young, or and you're getting out of the military and you got your GI Bill and you plan on going to school and living off the GI Bill, and maybe you haven't gotten married yet and you certainly don't have kids yet, then you can kind of go with the minimalist mentality and just live off of ramen noodles and macaroni and cheese and not have to worry about the job. I mean, that's great if you can do that, but most of us have commitments. Like my wife and I have 4 kids, a house, and 2 dogs, and everything else, which is why I'm keeping my airline job for right now, at least, until I. And besides my airline job, probably like being a firefighter does provide quite a bit of flexibility and allows me with some predictable time off and some large chunks of time off where I can work on my entrepreneurial pursuits. So if that's one thing about being in the military, man, you got that steady paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. It's really tough to just walk away from that and start over from scratch, which is why I would encourage people, plan ahead and get started on your, whatever it may be, your transition plan while you're still in and while you're still collecting that paycheck, and have some type of a financial income or plan as you transition out, at least in the beginning, something that doesn't suck the life out of you, but at least will help you pay the bills. Unless you're married to somebody who's got a great job, that's always a penny too.
Sure. Yeah. And absolutely. I think that's part of the reason I started Second Half Comeback to begin with. Was I felt that divide. Like I felt like a lot of the blogs and podcasts out there, the lifestyle design stuff, quote unquote, was sort of targeted at, folks in their 20s that had some cubicle job they hated, you know what I mean? And they were just looking to quit that job and travel the world, working out of a backpack kind of vibe, which I love. That's fantastic. But I definitely couldn't relate directly. I have one job that I love, the firefighting.
Mm-hmm.
I have another business that I spent 20 years building. Wife, kid, house, all those things you mentioned. So I'm not trying to, take off and roam around the world and work out of a backpack. I'm just trying to spend more time doing the things I love with the people I love, and I know there's tons of people out there that have the same thing. So, and you're right, back to your point about quitting your job or whatever. The other reason this is an amazing time, the online business angle is that you can start these things as a side hustle. And you and I are both perfect examples of that. You can start working on these projects and these directions on the side while you're still in your current career. And then really that also buys you the time to actually sort of figure out what works and what doesn't work, what clicks with you, what resonates with you. Because as you mentioned, I think we're both in the same boat that I've changed directions a couple times as I tried to figure out my path here. But doing it as kind of a side hustle, although it's a lot of work and, it's a challenge to juggle family and all those things, it does allow you the time to kind of figure it out. You just need to start the journey. The path doesn't really reveal itself until you step out onto it. You know what I mean?
Right. And not having that financial burden or that financial pressure of, okay, my bills aren't getting paid right now, I better get this entrepreneurial thing going. That's not a very good position to be in. You really got to find something you can get started while you're still working, or while you've got your financial requirements taken care of. Of course, there are those people that came from nothing and had no choice but to get their entrepreneurial dream going. But the reality of it is, it's much better getting things started while you're still able to pay your bills, and then you figure out on down the road when it is you can walk away from the job and the cube farm or whatever it may be. And if nothing else, being stuck in the job and the cube farm can be your motivation, as opposed to not having any money to not pay your bills.
Yeah. Now the tough part, the tricky part to that, the downside is that same level of comfort, for lack of a better word, so having that good job already and having the house and having all these things can also make it incredibly difficult to stay focused and motivated day in and day out to work towards your new dream, because you're already pretty darn comfortable. Most of us, perhaps don't have our back against the wall, so to speak. We're pretty comfortable. And so to sort of shoehorn this into your life along with all these other comforts you already have can be a separate challenge. It's somewhat easy when your back's against the wall, you know what I mean? When there's a fire under your ass, but when things are pretty good and you just want to make them better, it's hard to do the grind,
And I think that's one of the things I experienced being in the military all those years was, granted, a PCS or a deployment or running off to an exercise for several weeks would dislodge me and I'd lose my momentum. It wasn't catastrophic that I'd lost my momentum. And so I'd be like, well, I don't know, maybe I'm not going to go back, maybe I'm not going to get behind this idea again. Just maybe I should try something different instead. And transition out of the military, that was a big motivator for me, because I'm like, okay, I'm finally going to do this, and now is the time. I basically putzed around for 20 years trying to get something started, and realized I still hadn't gotten anything started. So now is the time, and this is the opportunity. So now I'm going to do that. I think there was a Jim Rohn quote regarding the same thing about being so comfortable that it's easy to do the things to be successful, but it's even easier not to do them.
That's right.
And that's the trap I think I fell into many times.
Yeah, I totally agree. And next thing you know, like you just said it, you related to my story too, is next thing you know, potentially 20 years has gone by, And the problem is, I'm a 46-year-old guy. So if I let 20 years go by again, you know what I mean? 66, here I am.
It's over.
Yeah, it's scary how fast, as you know.
Yeah, I'm
you
47 myself.
Yeah.
So I hear you.
A year right now goes by so fast, it's ridiculous. And And I'm really trying to do my best to put the brakes on that a little bit and get to work. I started, working on this podcast stuff, this online business stuff. I'm going to say 2008. Like, it was just like everybody in the world. It seems like I read 4 Hour Work Week and a couple other books that came out around that time. And then I screwed around for, the last 8 years or whatever it is. In the meantime, people are starting and launching and killing, successful businesses. And like half the big names you hear right now, the Pat Flynn's and John Lee Dumas and all these guys, started a couple years ago. I started 5 years before that, but I didn't get it done. I didn't stay focused,
Yeah. So focus is a huge thing. And that's really one of the entrepreneurial traps that's out there is, how do you get your entrepreneurial venture up and running in the midst of a busy lifestyle and in the midst of having a good time and just enjoying some of the hard work you've already put in? I sacrifice a lot of time with friends and family at this point because I'm in here, running this business instead of going out there and hanging out with them. I give up time in the evenings and weekends to get my entrepreneurial ventures going, but it's what I want to do. And it's my wife's been looking at me kind of strange. She's like, wow, you're almost like a kid in a candy store. I've never seen you this way because you're so excited about it. So
yep.
It's definitely what I need to be doing. Yeah.
That's a new sort of strategy I just started implementing here in the last probably 2 months. Is I was feeling that struggle too, sort of balancing family time, because we're already super busy. I got the fire schedule. I'm gone for 48 hours at a time. And I come home and my little boy is missing me. And, my wife's been working the real estate appraisal business while I'm gone. So it's difficult for her to give him the attention that he needs. And so I come home and I have that guilt. I just want to spend time with my boy, and with my wife. And I finally realized that the reason I'm doing this is for them. And if I can get them involved, and even my little boy, he's 6. And lately he's a sharp little kid. And I've been talking to him about why daddy needs to do this. So I'll just tell him daddy needs to go work on the podcast for a couple hours and then we can play. But if we can get this podcast successful, it may allow us to camp more, to fish more, to go to the beach, to do all the things that we want to do as a family. And it's really helped because now I feel his excitement when I tell him about it. Instead of being disappointed, he actually gets excited for the potential of what lies ahead. And same with my wife and some of my other friends and family around us. So, I know it's tempting. In fact, I was very careful in the beginning to shelter this from certain people in my life so that I didn't have that sort of negative feedback that a young business. Yeah. There's a point where you got to get things rolling enough that you can sustain through that negative feedback. But the important people, the core people in your life, I would say try to get them involved and excited about it as early as possible. And then that'll take away some of that guilt and some of that conflict you have when you're working on this instead of spending time with them.
Yeah, that's incredible you say that, because I went through the same experience over the last couple of years, actually. That guilt of, I should be spending time with my family, whatever. But when you do start to involve them, if nothing else, not necessarily like they're in here with you, but if you tell them what it is you're doing and what you need. Like, hey, I've got some interviews for the podcast going on this morning, and then I'll be done at this time, and then I'll be available. Oh, okay, and they're fine with it. Yep. But if they think you've just gone into your studio or office to putz around some more, then they might be inclined to bother you or whatever. But
absolutely.
And so really, and talking about successes of the business or your statistics for downloads, whatever it may be, get them involved in that and watching it and having them be a part of it helps tremendously instead of just being the lone wolf out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other tricky part too, and I'm struggling with this having just launched. So I confess to being a bit of a statistic checker right now because it's so new. I've
never done that.
I just launched less than 2 weeks ago or whatever. So I just needed to know that somebody cared and somebody was listening, but if you're going to, take this time away from your family, it's so important that you make sure the time that you're spending with your family, you're present, that you're really spending that time with them and not looking at your phone every 2 seconds and not, checking statistics.
Absolutely.
And tweeting and doing whatever, all these things. And I'm definitely struggling with that because I'm trying to keep the momentum going, but, it's something I'm trying to focus on. Put in your focused work time in whatever chunks you can. And then, when you're spending time with your family and your loved ones, be present for that time as much as you can.
Hey, that's great advice. And, it sounds like you and I are experiencing almost parallel life entrepreneurial struggles and successes all at the same time. So, hey, our time's getting close to being up here. So, you got any final words of wisdom? I mean, you've shared so many great things with us already. As far as second half comeback and where you see it going, or how that might relate to some of the veterans out there or in the veteran community that are looking to do something like this or something along the same lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line, and I know this is a little bit cliche, but just take action. Just start taking action in the direction of your dreams, and that action, as you mentioned, can be a small step forward. It doesn't have to be the huge leap. But you just need to start the ball rolling in that direction, because as you and I have both learned, sometimes the idea you think you have in your head, until you take action on it, you can't really figure out if that's something that's going to work, if it's a valid idea, So just be in the mindset of, I'm going to make this change in my life. I'm going to make this comeback. And also additionally, focus on your why, right? Like you need to know why you want to make that change. But then start taking action in that direction and take consistent daily action, no matter how small, and just keep moving in that direction until kind of the path forms in front of you. You know what I mean? And then, like you said, reach out, like find communities online that, you can surround yourself with like-minded, extraordinary people that are doing the same things that you dream about doing, and connect with them, and then just start taking action towards your dream.
All right, DG, it's been great talking with you, and thanks for sharing your story with us. Great advice, and hopefully, I know that all the listeners will definitely get a lot out of hearing your experience and your success, and I look forward to seeing the success of second half comeback out there. I know I've already become a frequent listener. Cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. We're going to have to get you on the podcast.
Hey, sounds great. All right, DG,
All right.
Take care.
I'm out. Talk to you later, Joe. See ya.
Thank you for listening to Veteran on the Move, your pathfinder to freedom. If you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes. Reviews are always greatly appreciated. So until next time, this veteran is Oscar Mike.